The seal is cracked. You're standing in a corridor of the Louvre at midnight, holding a small cedarwood box that must be placed in the hands of the Queen of France's chamberwoman, and the red wax seal across its lid, your master's seal, the letter R pressed into vermilion wax, has a hairline fracture running straight through it. You didn't drop the box. You didn't knock it. Somewhere between the Pont au Change and this cold stone passage, the wax simply cracked in the night air, the way wax does when warm rooms give way to freezing ones. It happens. Any chandler's son knows it happens. But this box is going to Catherine de Medici, and the box contains perfume, and a broken seal on a box of perfume in this palace, in this year, means one thing to the people who will examine it under candlelight before it goes anywhere near the Queen. It means someone may have opened it and put something inside. You are 14 years old. Your name is Colin Ferrand. You have been in Paris for 8 months, apprentice to Maître René, the Florentine perfumer whose shop stands on the Pont au Change. And in those 8 months you have learned exactly one thing more thoroughly than all the others combined. In the household of an Italian queen, in a court that whispers the word poison, the way other people say good morning, the boy who carries the scents is the boy who gets blamed. Down the corridor, a torch gutters in an iron ring. You can hear the guard at the far door shifting his weight, his halberd butt scraping stone. In a moment he will call you forward. In a moment a woman named Madonna Antonia, who has served the Queen since Florence, who trusts no one born north of the Alps, will take this box from your hands and turn it over and hold the seal to the light. Your heart is hitting your ribs so hard, you're afraid the guard can hear it. Picture the Louvre. Not the palace you know from paintings, not the endless glass and gold of later centuries. Picture a squat medieval fortress with one brand new wing of pale carved stone stitched onto it, scaffolding still clinging to the masonry, a moat that smells of dead fish and worse, courtyards where chickens are kept 20 steps from rooms hung with silk. Add torchlight that never quite reaches the corners. Add corridors so cold in winter that the water freezes in the basins. Add 300 courtiers, 1,000 servants, dogs, dwarfs, astrologers, Italian bankers, Scottish guards, and one king, Henri II, who loves hunting and jousting, and a woman 20 years his senior who is not his wife, and somewhere in the middle of it, awake when everyone decent is asleep, a queen in her 40th year whom half of France still calls the Italian woman, the shopkeeper's daughter, the merchant's brat, a queen who has spent 25 years being humiliated in her own household, and who has learned to do a real living after dark. That's the world you walked into 8 months ago, carrying your father's letter and a satchel of grass leather that smelled of home. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists staring up at the stonework. We're going in through the servants' gate at midnight, with a cracked seal and a 14-year-old's hammering heart. One boy, one palace, everything he would have smelled, touched, feared, and survived. So I make these history stories, and honestly, I still have no idea whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just quietly fascinated by poisoned gloves and dying kings. Either way, subscribe if you like, get comfortable. Here we go. The guard calls you forward, you walk. That's the first rule you learned in this palace. When you're afraid, walk anyway, because standing still looks like guilt. The corridor is maybe 40 feet long, and it takes a year to cross. Your shoes, good grass leather, your father's work, Risold once already on Paris cobbles, make almost no sound. That's deliberate. Maître René had you practice walking on the shop floorboards for a week before he let you carry anything to the palace. A perfumer's boy must move like scent moves, he said. Present everywhere, noticed nowhere. The guard is Scottish, one of the archers of the King's Scottish Guard, red and yellow, a face like a brick wall with a beard on it. He knows you by now. He doesn't know your name. Why would he? But he knows the smell of you, which is the smell of the shop. Orris root and ambergris and beeswax and something faintly animal underneath. Civis, which clings to everything and everyone who works on the Pont au Change. He wrinkles his nose the way he always does, jerks his chin at the inner door, and lets you pass. And there she is, Madonna Antonia, waiting in the antechamber with a candle in a brass stick, a woman of maybe 50, with a face like a folded letter, dressed in black wool so fine it drinks the light. You hold out the box. She takes it, turns it, and stops. Her thumb finds the crack in the seal before her eyes do. You watch her thumb stop moving. You watch her lift the box toward the candle flame. The hairline fracture catches the light and glows like a thread of blood through the vermilion wax. "This is broken," she says. She says it in French for your benefit, though her French wears Italian shoes. The cold Madonna. Your voice comes out steadier than you have any right to expect. The wax was warm from the shop. The night is freezing. It cracked on the bridge. I never set the box down. I never opened it. On my life. On your life, she repeats. She doesn't say it like a threat. That's the terrible thing. She says it like an accountant confirming a figure. She holds the box for a long moment. Behind her, through a half-open door, you can see firelight moving on a painted ceiling, and you can hear, very faintly, voices. A woman's voice, low, speaking Italian, and another voice answering, a man's, soft, with a strange rhythm to it, half chant, half conversation. The Queen is awake. The Queen is always awake at this hour. Everyone in the palace kitchen says so. The Queen sleeps 4 hours, 5 at most, and the rest of the night she reads or writes letters, 30, 40 letters a night when it suits her. Or she talks with the men everyone crosses themselves about, the Florentines, the star readers, the ones who come and go by the small stair. Madonna Antonia makes her decision. You see her make it. A small exhale through the nose. You will wait, she says. If the water is wrong, you will still be here. The water. You know what that means. Somewhere behind that door, a woman of the chamber will open the box, take out the flacon of scented water your master spent 3 days composing. Orange flower, neroli, a thread of musk built on spirits of wine, and she will pour a little into a silver dish, and someone will smell it. And someone, probably a kitchen girl who has no choice, will touch it to her lips and wrist, and everyone will wait. Because 8 years ago, when the king's father was still alive, no, longer now, more than 20 years ago, but in this palace 20 years is yesterday, the king's elder brother, the Dauphin François, drank a cup of water after playing tennis on a hot day at Tournon and died. He was 19. His Italian cupbearer, a gentleman named Montecuccoli, who had come to France in the Queen's own entourage, was arrested, tortured until he said what they wanted, and pulled apart by 4 horses in the square at Lyons, while the court watched from a scaffold draped in cloth. The autopsy, by the way, showed a young man's lungs ruined by pleurisy. He had almost certainly died of illness. Cold water on an overheated body was the least of it. It didn't matter. He was the heir of France, and he died with an Italian nearby, and the Italian nearby had once made the mistake of owning a book about poisons, and that was enough. And every Italian in this palace, from the queen herself down to the boy who sweeps her perfumer's floor, has lived in the shadow of those 4 horses ever since. So you wait. Madonna Antonia takes the box through the inner door, and you stand in the antechamber with the Scottish guard's eyes on your back, and you have nothing to do but breathe and feel your feet go numb inside your good leather shoes, and listen. The palace at night is not silent. That surprised you the first time. It ticks and settles like a cooling oven. Somewhere above you a floorboard creaks under a footstep that stops, waits, continues. Water drips in the moat outside. You can hear it through the arrow slit, a slow flat plink, plink into black water. A dog is dreaming somewhere down the corridor, its muffled half barks coming through 2 closed doors, and underneath everything, so constant you stopped hearing it weeks ago, the river. The Seine slides past the palace walls all night, every night, hissing along the stone, carrying the whole city's filth toward the sea, and the sound of it is like breath. The inner door opens, Madonna Antonia comes out. She's holding the flacon, unstoppered, and for one instant your stomach drops through the floor, and then you see her face, and her face has changed, not softened. Faces like hers don't soften, but the accountant has finished the figures, and the figures are correct. The Queen, she says, asks what is in it. You blink. Madonna? The water. She says it is not what she ordered. She ordered the orange water she has had before. This is different. She wishes to know what your master has done. And now, this is the part you will remember for the rest of your life, and you will live a long time. Now a voice comes from beyond the door, in French this time. A low voice, slightly hoarse, with rolled Italian R's that 30 years in France never sanded away. A voice that is amused and precise, and completely, unnervingly awake at 1 in the morning. Bring the boy in. If he made it, he can name it. You did not make it. You ground the orris, you washed the flasks, you held things and fetched things and stirred things. But Maître René made you smell every stage, made you name every note out loud, rapped your knuckles when you guessed lazily. And so when Madonna Antonia steps aside, reluctant, radiating disapproval like heat off a brazier, and you walk on legs you cannot feel into the private cabinet of Catherine de Medici, Queen of France, you are perhaps the only 14-year-old in Paris who could answer the question. You keep your eyes down. You were taught that. So what you see first is the floor, black and white tiles in a diamond pattern, and on the tiles the hem of the black gown, plain wool, almost a widow's gown, though her husband is alive and hale and probably at this hour asleep in another woman's rooms. What you see second, because you cannot help it, is the room in the edges of your vision. Candles, not 2 or 3, the way even wealthy rooms are lit. Dozens. White wax, the expensive kind. No tallow stink, burning in branches on tables and brackets. So many that the room is warmer than the antechamber by 10 degrees, and the air itself smells of honey and hot wick. Books everywhere, in stacks. Papers with lines and circles drawn on them. A sphere of brass rings on a stand. You will learn later it is called an armillary sphere, a model of the heavens, a mirror, round, black, not glass, some dark polished stone, leaning against the wall with a cloth half over it, and you look away from that fast without knowing why. And a small table where a man sits with charts spread in front of him. You don't look at his face. You see ink-stained fingers and a beard going grey, and you smell him. Everyone has a smell. Maître René says the nose never lies about people, and he smells of tallow smoke and mice and old paper, like a room nobody cleans. Well, says the Queen of France, she is not beautiful. Even at 14, even terrified, even with your eyes pointed at the floor, you register that in the first heartbeat she is a heavy woman of 40 with prominent eyes and her mother-in-law's chin, and no one has ever called her beautiful, and the whole court knows the king keeps her portrait nowhere, and another woman's initials on his armour, his palaces, his dinner plates. What she is instead is present. The room arranges itself around her the way iron filings arrange around a lodestone. You will meet kings in your life and feel less pulled. What did your master put in my water, boy? You wet your lips, and you answer, because Maître René drilled you until the answers lived below fear, in the part of you that keeps breathing while you sleep. Orange flower, Majesty, as before. But the neroli this year is from the new pressing. It came up the river in October. It's greener than last year's, sharper. So the master rounded it. There's a little more musgrain, ground finer. And you hesitate, then say it because it is true, and she asked, and a very small amount of bergamot, new, from Calabria. It wasn't in the old water. That's the difference your Majesty is smelling. It's the bergamot. Silence. Wax hisses somewhere. The man at the table has stopped moving his pen. Bergamot, the Queen says. She says the word the Italian way, and something happens in her voice. Nothing you could put a name to at 14, but you will understand it years later. Calabria. The south. The smell of somewhere that is not France. Look at me, she says. You lift your eyes. Heavy lids. Eyes so dark the candle flames float in them. One flame per eye. Perfectly still. She examines you the way Madonna Antonia examined the seal. You are the grass boy. René wrote to me about your father. Glove leather. The Queen of France knows what your father does. Your father, who salts skins in a yard in Provence 18 days' ride from this room. Something behind your ribs turns over. Yes, Majesty. The seal on the box was cracked. The cold, Majesty. Warm wax, freezing air. It cracked on the bridge. You understand why my women must care about a cracked seal. It is not a question, but she waits, so it becomes one. And here is the moment where a clever boy would say something clever, and a frightened boy would say nothing, and you, God knows why, tired and cold and 14, say the true thing instead. Because of the horses at Lyon, Majesty. The pen at the table clicks down. Madonna Antonia goes still by the door, and the Queen of France looks at you for 3 full seconds, and then does the very last thing you expect. She laughs. One short, low note, almost soundless, more breath than laugh, and it is gone as fast as it came. But you heard it, and you will hold it in your hands for the rest of your life like something warm. Yes, she says, because of the horses at Lyon. Tell your master the water is accepted. Tell him the bergamot is accepted. A pause. Tell him next time he changes my order, he changes it on paper first. Yes, Majesty. Antonia, give the boy something hot before he crosses that bridge. He is the colour of a fish. And that is your dismissal, and you back out of the candlelight the way you were taught. And the last thing you hear from the room as the door closes is her voice, dropping back into Italian, back into the low tide of talk with the ink-stained man, back into the work she does while France sleeps. And you don't know it yet, standing in the cold antechamber with your heart still galloping while a kitchen girl pushes a cup of hot wine and water into your hands, but you have just been given your place in the machinery. You're going to be a boy of the midnight deliveries. For the next 2.5 years, while the daylight court struts and hunts and dances, you're going to carry the small necessary things of a queen's private hours through the sleeping Louvre. The waters, the pastilles, the scented gloves, the wax, the things she orders and the things you're told never to mention, and you're going to see, at the edges of candlelight, through half-open doors, in fragments you will spend 50 years assembling, the secret night-shaped kingdom of Catherine de' Medici. And you are going to be standing close enough to hear the crowd go silent on the last day of June, in the year 1559, when the whole bright daylight world cracks like warm wax in cold air, and the midnight world becomes the only one that matters. But that is 1.5 years away. Tonight you just drink the hot wine and burn your tongue and don't care, and walk home across the frozen city with your empty satchel, and the bridge boards boom hollow under your feet, and the river breathes beneath you, and you are so relieved to be alive and unblamed that you could sing. You don't sing. You're learning. In this city at night you don't make a sound, you don't have to. The shop. First. You should see the shop, because the shop is where every thread of this story begins and ends, and because you spend more of your life there than anywhere else on earth. The Pont au Change is a bridge with a city on it. That's the only way to describe it to someone who hasn't stood there. Houses, 4 and 5 stories tall, packed along both edges of the bridge so tightly that, when you cross it, you cannot see the river at all. You're simply in a street, a narrow, roaring street that happens to have the Seine underneath it, and you only remember the water when you feel the boards tremble under a heavy cart, or when you hear, through the floor of the shop at night, the long, slow grinding of ice going out in a thaw. Goldsmiths, money changers, jewellers, bird sellers. The bridge smells of charcoal and hot metal and bird droppings and river damp, and threading through all of it, from one particular doorway near the middle of the span comes a smell like nothing else in Paris. That doorway is yours. Maître René's shop is 11 feet wide at the front. You've measured it, sweeping. It goes back maybe 30 feet, into darkness and shelves, and then down, a twisting stair to a lower room built half into the bridge pier itself, where the stills are, and where the real work happens, and where in summer the cool comes up off the river through the stones, and in winter the cold comes through them like a blade. The front room is theatre, flasks of coloured water in the window to catch the light, gloves laid out on black velvet, little pomanders of silver filigree, soaps from Bologna, the fashionable things fashionable people come to touch. The back room and the cellar are truth, sacks of orris root that must be ground to powder. That's you, that your forearms aching, the pestle handle worn smooth and slightly greasy under your palm, the fine pale dust that gets into your eyebrows and your bread, and makes everything you eat for the first month taste faintly of violets, bricks of beeswax, bladders of civet paste that arrive sewn shut, and God help you the first time you open one without turning your face away. Ambergris locked in the strong box like money, because it is money. A lump the size of your fist is worth more than the house it sits in. Spirits of wine in glass carboys packed in straw, copper alembics with their long swan necks, and the little charcoal furnace whose warmth is the only warmth in the cellar, and which must never, never, never be left burning unwatched, because the shop is made of wood, and the bridge is made of wood, and the whole quarter is made of wood, and spirits of wine burn with a flame you can barely see. Your bed is under the counter in the front room, a straw pallet, a wool blanket, and the shop cat, who has decided you are furniture and sleeps on your legs. You wake every morning to the boards booming as the first carts cross the bridge in the dark, and to the smell, always, forever, soaked into the timbers, of violet and honey and alcohol and musk, the smell that is now the smell of your own skin, so deep that on your one visit to a bathhouse the attendant sniffed you and asked if you were the perfumer's boy before you'd said a word. Maître René himself, Renato, if you catch him talking to himself over the alembic, a Florentine, 50-something, small and round-shouldered, with black eyes and beautiful hands, soft, pale, meticulous hands he guards like a lutenist, gloved outdoors in all weathers, and a nose that is his entire fortune. He came to France in the Queen's wedding entourage 25 years ago, one artisan among the crowd of Florentines that arrived with the 14-year-old Medici bride. Her cooks, her embroiderers, her banker cousins, her secret sorrows. He has served her ever since. He speaks French with the whole shop's worth of Italy still in it, and he corrects your French grammar anyway, which is somehow more humiliating than anything else. He teaches you the way stone teaches water, by being there constantly and wearing you into shape. Smell this. What is it? No. Again. Close your eyes. Stop naming what you expect and name what is there. What is under it? What is under that? A scent is built like a household. Piccolo. The top notes are the servants who greet you at the door, gone in an hour. The heart is the family, and at the bottom in the cellar is the thing the household is really built on, and it stays after everyone else has left the room. Musk, civet, amber, the animal in the silk. Never trust a smell that has no animal in it, and never trust a person who has no smell at all. He teaches you the gloves, which are the heart of the trade you were born into. Spanish leather, they call the finest scented gloves, though half of them are cut from skins your own father's yard in grass could have tanned. The leather comes in supple and pale kidskin mostly, and it stinks. That's the thing no customer ever thinks about. That fine leather is born stinking of the tan yard, of dog dung and oak bark and death. And the perfumer's whole art is a war against that stink. You work the paste into the skins with your bare hands, fats rendered and clarified, beaten with orange flower and jasmine pomade, violet powder, a breath of musk, hours of it. Your fingers ache at the roots by evening, that deep ache in the fat of the thumb that you can feel in your teeth, and the grease works into every crack of your knuckles so that your hands by candlelight look varnished. In January the cracks split and bleed, and the alcohol finds every one of them, a bright wire of pain, and Maître René glances at your wince and says, without sympathy and without cruelty, "Now you know what the gloves cost. The customer never will. That is the trade." And he teaches you, carefully, obliquely, in fragments across months, the way a man teaches something he wishes he didn't have to. The other thing. The shadow that stands behind every perfumer in Paris, and behind the Queen's Florentine perfumer most of all. It happens the first time in your 3rd month, on an evening in early spring, 1558. A gentleman comes into the shop at closing. Velvet, sword, spurs still on, which means he's come straight from somewhere and is going straight to somewhere else. He wants, he says, something for rats, something quiet, something a careful man could keep in a small box, and he says it while looking at Maître René in a particular way, a way with a smile folded inside it. You're behind the counter, wrapping soap in paper, and you keep wrapping, and you feel the temperature of the room change. Maître René does not stop tidying the glove tray. He says, pleasantly in his shopkeeper's voice. For rats, monsieur, you want the apothecary 2 doors past the goldsmith's, on the left. Arsenic he has, and real gar, and he keeps a register of who buys, as the law requires, as I am sure a gentleman so careful would wish. Here we sell only what smells sweet. The gentleman's smile unfolds a little. He says, They tell me the Queen's Italian sells other things. They tell me all sorts of stories about the Queen's Italian. And Maître René looks up then, and there is nothing in his face at all, and that nothing is the most frightening thing you have seen in Paris up to this hour. And he says softly, People tell stories about Italians, monsieur. It passes the time between wars. The spurs ring out of the shop. The door bangs. And Maître René stands for a moment with his beautiful hands flat on the counter, looking at nothing, looking suddenly 10 years older. And then he says, Not really to you. They come every year or two, sometimes to buy, sometimes to be able to say they bought. You will hear, Piccolo, before long what they say about me, that my gloves kill, that my waters kill, that there is a door in this shop for customers of the night. You will hear it said of the Queen, Whatever dies near her, we killed it. A prince, a cardinal, a lapdog, it makes no difference. You want to know the truth of it? He turns and looks at you, and taps the side of his enormous nose. The truth, he says, is that fear has the best nose in France. Fear can smell poison in clean water. Fear smelled it at Tournon in a cup a sick boy drank from. And a man I knew, a man who dined at this table when this table was in another shop, was pulled into 4 pieces for it while the trumpets played. Nothing I sell will ever hurt anyone, and it will never matter. Now lock the door and grind the orris. The Queen's order goes out Thursday. You lock the door, you grind the orris. And that night, lying under the counter with the cat on your legs and the river hissing under the boards, you understand something you couldn't have put into words at 14, but which shaped every night that came after. You have been apprenticed not just into a trade, but into a suspicion. You will spend your work in life carrying beautiful smells through a city that is always, quietly, sniffing you for death. Thursday comes, the Queen's order goes out, and it's you who carries it, because it is always you now. Maître René's knees are bad on the ice, and the journeyman Guillaume drinks. And this is how the pattern of your life sets, like wax taking a seal. 3, 4 nights a week, after the shop closes and the respectable city bars its shutters, you pack the satchel. Everything wrapped, everything sealed, everything counted twice against the written order, because Madonna Antonia counts it a 3rd time. Scented waters for the Queen's toilette, pastilles to burn in her rooms, little cones of powdered aloes wood and ambergris, and gum that go onto a hot silver plate and unravel into smoke, because the Queen has views about air. Bad air carries disease. Everyone knows it. The plague itself travels in stinks. The Louvre in summer, with its moat and its middens and its 3,000 human bodies, is a fortress of bad air. And Catherine de' Medici burns perfume against it, the way other people burn candles against the dark. Gloves. Always gloves. She gives them away by the dozen, to ambassadors' wives, to her ladies, to the women she is courting for information, and every pair says without words, This came from Florence's daughter. Remember that Florence's daughter thought of you. And you carry it all across the sleeping city, and the city at night becomes yours. Understand what night means here, because it does not mean what it means now. When the curfew bell rings from the Châtelet, you can hear it from the shop, A hard, cracked bronze voice. The chains go up. Actual chains thick as your wrist, strung across the street ends at waist height, neighbourhood by neighbourhood, so that no band of riders can move fast through the dark. The taverns turn their fires down. The law says no one abroad without a lantern, and the watch, the get, old men and conscripted shopkeepers with pikes and one lantern among 6, creaks through the streets on its rounds, and everyone else who moves the way you learn to move, quickly, quietly, close to the walls, with a paper in your shirt that says whose business you're on. Your paper says the Queen. Maitre René made you memorize what to do. If the watch stops you, you show the paper and stand still and say nothing clever. If anyone else stops you, you run. Drop the satchel if you must. The Queen can wait a day for orange water, but no one on earth, he says, holding your shoulder harder than he has ever held it. No one will believe a dead boy carried nothing but perfume. You're stopped by the watch 9 times in 2 years. You run twice. Once from 2 men who came out of a doorway near Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois, with the particular unhurried walk of men who have decided something, and you went over a chain like a cat and left them cursing at it. Once from something worse. A night in Lent, black as the inside of a boot, when you heard, in the alley you had just decided not to take, a sound you knew from the tan-yards of home, the wet, busy, unmistakable sound of dogs at a carcass, and then realised there were no dogs in Paris that ran loose at night in packs, none but the ones by the gibbet at Montfaucon, and you did not stay to learn what the carcass was. You ran with the sweat freezing on your back, and the satchel buckle hammering your hip like a small fist, and you did not tell Maître René because he would have stopped sending you, and you could not have borne that. Because the truth you'd never have confessed to the priest at Saint-Jacques, is that you had come to love it, the fear and all, the city stripped of its daylight crowds down to its stone bones, frost furring the chains, the river smoking in the cold, your own breath loud inside your hood, and at the end of every run, glowing across the black water like a lamp behind a shutter, the Louvre, with its one wing of new white stone, and its gate that opened to your knock, and somewhere high inside it, a room full of candles, where the most feared woman in France was awake and working and expecting what you carried. You were 14, then 15. You were the boy who walked into the midnight world 3 nights a week. It never once occurred to you that the midnight world might walk out into the day. Let me show you the palace properly, the way you learned it, not front to back like a visitor, but inside out like a servant. The Louvre in 1558 is 2 buildings arguing with each other. The old one is a fortress. Philip Augustus built it 3.5 centuries ago to guard Paris against the English. A grim square of towers around a courtyard, walls 13 feet thick at the base, and though the great central keep was pulled down before you were born, the west and south sides are still that old dark castle, damp-stained, arrow-slitted, medieval to the marrow. The new one is a dream, 1 wing, just one, on the west side of the courtyard, begun 10 years ago by the architect Pierre Lescaut for the old king, and continued for this one, pale golden stone carved like lace, tall windows, garlands and goddesses cut so fine you can see the tendons in a sculpted wrist from 30 feet below. Jean Goujon's carvings. Men stand in the courtyard mud and just look up at it. The scaffolding never entirely comes down. All the years you serve there, some part of the palace is a building site. Sawdust, stone dust, rope, the talk of mallets on chisels through every daylight hour, masons' boys younger than you hauling water up ladders, The court lives in the middle of the construction the way a family lives in a house while the roof is being rebuilt, which is to say, magnificently and miserably at once. That's the thing the paintings never show you. The Queen's own windows look out on lifting tackle. The King of France dresses to the sound of hammers. You come in by the postern near the river, always the same way, across the Pont au Change to the right bank, west along the Rue de la Sonnerie, and under the dark bulk of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois, the royal parish church, whose bell you will have reason to remember all your life, though for now it only tells you the hour. Then along the wall to the little gate where the guard knows the shop's mark on your paper. Then the smell changes. Every great household has its own smell, and the Louvre's is this: river damp and wet stone at the bottom, wood smoke and roasting fat riding over it from the kitchens that never fully go out, horse and leather from the stables across the yard, the sweet rot of the moat, worse in August, unbelievable in a hot September, wax and rushes and dogs in the corridors, and laid over the whole of it like a lady's hand over a wound, perfume. Everyone of quality wears it. The pastilles burn in a dozen rooms. You can track the court through its own building by nose alone, and you do. Below the stairs, the Louvre is a town. That is not a figure of speech. The kitchens alone are a street of rooms. The great kitchen with fireplaces a man can stand in, the pastry, the fruitery, the saucery, the roasting spits turned by boys whose faces have gone the colour of the meat they turn, and past them the wine cellars, the wood stores, the plate rooms with their locks and their sworn keepers, the laundry with its steam and its slapping wet linen, and its women whose forearms could break yours. Perhaps 4,000 people are attached to this court when it is all assembled. Nobody knows exactly, not even the controllers who pay them, and they are fed in shifts, in halls, off boards on trestles, a roaring tide of soup and bread and watered wine twice a day. The noise below stairs at dinner time is the noise of a market. The noise above stairs at the same hour is music, and the space between those two noises is about 14 steps of a spiral stair. You learn the between places. Every palace is made of them. The servants' stairs, screw tight, worn hollow in the middle of each step where you press yourself into the newel to let a man with a wood basket past in his load, scrapes a line of cold across the back of your neck. The passages behind the tapestried walls. Yes, they are real, not a storyteller's invention. Gaps between the hung cloth and the stone, sometimes wide enough to walk, where the dust lies like grey snow and the draught breathes along at ankle height, and where you can hear, through arras thick as a mattress, the wool-muffled sound of great people saying things they think are private. You don't linger in those. Boys who linger in those get remembered, and you learn the people of the night shift, because the night has its own household. The porter at the postern, old Mathurin, a Norman with one eye and a brazier, who lets you warm your hands for the length of exactly one story about his wars. He was at Pavia, he says, where the old king was captured, though half below stairs says he was never nearer Pavia than Rouen. The kitchen girl, Perrette, 16, quick as a knife flash, who is one of the tasters when the Queen's waters come in, and who was the one who touched your master's orange water to her lips that first night of the cracked seal. You didn't know it then. She tells you later, months later, matter of fact, licking soup off her thumb. I drank your water, Grace. If your master ever kills the Queen, he kills me first, so mind your grinding. And she laughs at your face, and from that night the two of you are not sweethearts, nothing so shaped, allies, night shift people. She leaves you heels of good bread on the sill by the postern stair. You bring her, once, a sliver of Bologna soap wrapped in paper, worth more than she earns in a week. Stolen. No, not stolen. Cut with permission from a damaged cake Maître René wrote off. You're careful about that distinction. In this palace, over lesser things than soap, people have lost their hands, and the Scottish archer, the one with the brick wall face, whose name turns out to be Andrew, and who after a year of wrinkling his nose at you begins, without a word of explanation, to teach you things while you wait in antechambers, how to stand so that standing costs nothing, weight even, knees soft, and you can hold a wall for 4 hours, how to sleep leaning up, truly sleep, in slices thin as shaved ham, and wake between one bell and the next, where never to stand in front of a closed door, doors open, and never between two men who are speaking quietly, and never ever within arm's reach of the king's food once it has been tasted, because after the tasting, this space around a king's plate is sacred, and the guard's instructions about that space are not instructions a boy would enjoy. It is Andrew who first shows you the Queen's other visitors. You're waiting in the low antechamber one night in the autumn of 1558. All Souls near, the palace smelling of the fog off the river, when the small stair door opens and 2 men come up whom you have never seen by daylight, and you would remember. The first is tall, in scholar's black, with a white beard cut like a spade, and eyes that pass over you the way a broom passes over a floor. The second is younger, Italian by his boots and his beard both, carrying a case that is the wrong shape for documents and the wrong weight for clothes. You can tell weight by how a man's shoulder sits, another thing the trade taught you. They do not give names to the guard. The guard does not ask. Madonna Antonia herself comes out for them, which she does for no one, and the 3 of them disappear toward the cabinet with its dozens of candles, and the door closes, and Andrew looks at the door, and then at you, and says, in his gravelly kitchen French, exactly 4 words, "You see nothing, wee man. I see nothing. You agree." "Good," says Andrew, and goes back to being a wall. But you have a nose. And what the wrong-shaped case smelled of as it passed you at half an arm's length was charcoal and metal and something scorched and mineral underneath. A smell you know from exactly one place on earth, the cellar under the shop, on the days when Maître René does not make perfume, and sends you upstairs and works alone at the little furnace, and the swan-necked alembic runs for hours, and what comes off it is not orange water. He has never told you what it is. You have never asked. But you know the smell of a distillation that is not for wearing, and the men on the Queen's small stair carried that smell in a leather case at midnight, and you saw nothing, and you have kept seeing nothing for 60 years, and you are only saying it now because everyone in this story is dead except you. What were they? Alchemists, astrologers, engravers of talismans. The court had a dozen names, and the preachers had one, sorcerers. The Queen kept them the way other queens kept musicians. Her own countryman Cosimo Ruggieri and his kind, men who cast nativities and calculated the hours. And once that you know of, because all Paris knew of it, because it was the wonder of the age, the man from Provence himself, Master Michel de Nostradamus, called to court by the Queen 2 years before you came, in the summer of 1556, lodged like a lord and brought to her at Saint-Germain, where, the story goes, and Perrette swears her aunt had it from a chamber woman who stood in the room. The Queen asked him about the fates of her children, and the old doctor was gracious and grave and full of comfortable words, and left again for the south loaded with gifts. And after he had gone, the Queen sat very late, and burned more candles than usual, and wrote no letters at all that night, because there was a verse. Everyone below stairs could say it by 1558. It had been printed and reprinted since 1555 in his Almanac of Prophecies, and it went. You heard it first from Perrette, whispered across a kitchen table with both her hands around a bowl of soup, in the mangled French of a girl reciting something learned by ear. The young lion shall overcome the old, on the field of combat in single battle. He shall put out his eyes in a cage of gold, 2 wounds won, then to die a cruel death. It's nonsense, you said. Lions in cages. It's about nothing. Half his verses are about nothing. That's the trick of them. Perrette shrugged, 16 years old and wiser than the College of Sorbonne. Maybe, she said, but the Queen didn't send for him about nothing. And the king jousts, Grace. The king jousts every chance he gets, in a gilded helmet, and he's 40 this year, and the young lords are 20. She blew on her soup. I'm only saying what the kitchen says. The kitchen is always wrong about everything, except when it isn't. You laughed. She laughed. Old Mathurin told the Pavia story again. The fog came up off the river and blurred the torches to soft yellow moons, and you shouldered the empty satchel and went home across the sleeping bridge, 15 years old, with a prophecy rattling in your head like a pebble in a shoe, and 8 months to go. But before the pebble becomes a stone, there is a wedding. And you should have the wedding, because it was the brightest daylight this story owns, and because you were there, at the edge of it, underneath it, the way you were at the edge and underneath of everything. And because the whole shining structure of that day is what makes the breaking 14 months later so hard to hold in the mind. The 24th of April, 1558, a Sunday. The Dauphin of France, Francois, 14 years old, your own age that spring, a boy your age, though a head shorter and pale as candle wax with a constant catarrh the whole palace pretends not to hear, marries Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, 15, who has lived at the French court since she was 5 and who is, by the testimony of every eye in Paris, including yours, the most beautiful girl anyone has ever seen. That is not gallantry. You saw her at 10 paces twice, and both times your thoughts simply stopped, the way a mill stops when the water is diverted, and stood empty until she had passed. The marriage is made at Notre Dame, and it is made deliberately, gorgeously public, a stage built up before the west doors so that the crowd, thousands upon thousands, jammed into the parvis and the streets and hanging out of every window and off the cathedral scaffolding itself, can watch a King of France's son marry a crowned queen in the open air. Paris has not seen a royal wedding at Notre Dame in 200 years. The city goes out of its mind. The shop has been mad for a month beforehand. Every gentlewoman within a day's ride wants gloves, wants waters, wants her furs sweetened and her prayer book scented. Yes, that is a service you provide. A drop of ambergris essence worked into the leather binding so that piety smells expensive, and you grind and stir and run deliveries until your feet crack, and Maître René takes the unheard-of step of hiring 2 extra boys for the fortnight, and still on the eve of the wedding you're all working past midnight, hands shining with jasmine pomade, while the whole bridge outside bangs and sings. The day itself the master shuts the shop, the only full holiday you will ever see him take, and the 2 of you go to watch, because the Queen's perfumer can stand in a crowd like anyone else. though he chooses the crowd carefully. The north side of the parvis backs to a goldsmith's wall, upwind. Always upwind, Piccolo. A professional habit that doubles as sound tactics. You can breathe and you can leave. What you remember 60 years on is not the ceremony. You're too far for the ceremony. The vows are a rumour that travels the crowd in a hush, outward from the stage like a ripple in a pond, everyone shushing everyone. What you remember is the machinery of splendour which you now know from underneath. The canopy of fleur-de-lis blue overhead. You know the man who supplied the wax that stiffened the fringe. The Swiss Guards' drums, so many together that the sound stops being sound and becomes a pressure on the breastbone. The Duke of Guise, the great soldier, tall and scarred, acting as master of ceremonies, waving the crowd back from the stage with his own hands, playing Paris like an instrument, and Paris loves him, roars for him, and standing under that roar you feel for the first time a thing you will feel again, later on a worse day. That a Paris crowd is a single animal, huge and warm and good-natured until the moment it is not. And her, Mary. The bride comes out into the April light in a gown of white. White, the colour French queens wear for mourning, and the old wives in the crowd suck their teeth at it. But she wears it anyway. They say she insisted, because white becomes her. And a crown thick with stones, and the sun comes off her and off the gold and off the cloth so that she seems to burn without being consumed. And 100,000 people make a sound you have never heard before and will never hear again. A soft, enormous, involuntary, like the whole city inhaling. All. Beside you, Maitre René watches with his gloved hands folded and says quietly in Italian, a sentence you only fully translate years later. All this light. And she has married a sick boy, and half these lords would eat the other half, and the bill for the candles alone would feed grass for a year. Then he buys you a wafer from a cart, which he has never done before and never does again, and the two of you eat standing upwind of history, and the bells of the whole city ring until the air itself trembles. Notre Dame's great bourdon underneath them all like the sea under waves. Afterward there are the fêtes, days of them, the banquet at the Archbishop's palace, the ball. Then the court sweeps across the river to the Palais on the Ile for celebrations. Paris talks about for years. Mechanical ships, they say, with silver sails, moving through the great hall as if by magic with the royal children aboard. 12 artificial horses of gold cloth. Fountains that ran wine. You see none of it. You're on the bridge working because celebration is your busy season, but Perrette sees the ships. Kitchen girls get corners of splendour the way you get corners of secrets. She describes them to you a week later at the postern brazier, her hands drawing sails in the torchlight, her face 15 and open and lit from inside, and old Mathurin nods along as if he had built them, and that, her hands in the torchlight, drawing ships that you keep. Of everything from the wedding of Mary Queen of Scots, the historians got the silver sails, and you got Perrette's hands, and you have never once envied the historians. That is the daylight world at its highest. Hold it in your mind, the drums, the white gown, the wine fountains, the roaring good-natured animal of the crowd, the Duke of Guise with his arms spread wide, the boy Dauphin coughing into his glove at his own wedding, and over it all the certainty, the absolute weight-bearing, load-carrying certainty of every soul in that city, that this is the order of the world, that the king is strong, and the kingdom is his, and the future is a straight paved road. Now come back down into the dark with me, because underneath that certainty, all that year and the next, the midnight world is working, and you are one of its errand boys. The Queen's night orders change, that winter of 1558 into 1559. You notice it the way you notice everything now through the satchel. More pastilles. She is burning more later. Madonna Antonia doubles the standing order for the aloes wood cones in November. More of the plain orange water and less of the fine compositions, which Maître René reads like a physician reading urine. She is not dressing to be seen. She is sitting up. And twice, 3 times, items that are not perfume at all. A sealed packet from the shop's locked drawer, no bigger than a prayer book, heavy the way lead is heavy, which the master hands you with both hands and instructions to carry inside your shirt against the skin and to give to no one but Antonia herself, and about which he says only, "If anyone asks, it is a gift of soap." It was not soap. Soap does not clink very faintly once when you shift it at the postern step. You have wondered for 60 years. Medals, you think now. Cast talismans, astrologers' work. Metal poured at calculated hours. The kind of thing that was found among her effects at the end. The kind of thing half the court wore secretly while denouncing it publicly. But you don't know. You carried it against your skin for half a league, and it held the warmth of your body the way metal does, and you gave it into Antonia's hands, and you know nothing the way Andrew taught you. And the palace you carry it through is changing pitch. The way a room changes when someone in the next room is arguing very quietly. The war. There is always a war. France and Spain have been at each other your whole life. Over Italy, over Flanders, over everything. The war is ending. The money is gone. That is not palace gossip. That is arithmetic even a perfumer's boy can do, because the shop's bills to certain great households are now paid in promises, and Maître René has begun demanding coin from all but 3 customers, and one of the 3 is the crown. Because you do not dun a king, you simply die owed. Peace is being made at a place called Cateau Cambrésis through the winter and into the spring of 1559, and when the terms leak out, Mathurin has them at the brazier before the heralds cry them, Paris chokes. Everything given back, the soldiers say. Piedmont, Savoy. A lifetime of Italian wars handed back across a table. In the tennis courts and the guard rooms, men who bled for those towns say the word peace the way you'd say the name of a man who cheated you. But peace it is, and peace is to be sealed the way great pieces are, with weddings. 2 of them. The king's daughter, Elizabeth, 13 years old, a grave, sweet-faced girl, you have made up violet powder for her women, is to marry the King of Spain himself, Philip II, the old enemy, a widower of 31 by proxy in Paris in June. And the king's sister, Madame Marguerite, is to marry the Duke of Savoy. 2 weddings, back to back, at the burning heart of summer, and Paris, which choked on the peace, will be given such a festival that it forgets the taste. Tournaments, above all. The great tournament in the Rue Saint-Antoine in the last days of June, where the King of France himself will run in the lists before his people. The orders pour into the shop in May and June like a river in flood. You sleep 5 hours, 4. Your hands crack. The orris dust hangs in the cellar air like fog. And late one night in the middle of it, this you will swear to on anything you are given to swear on. Carrying the Thursday delivery through the low antechamber, you pass close by the cabinet door as it opens for Madonna Antonia, and inside, past her shoulder, in the honey-coloured blaze of all those candles, you see the Queen of France standing at her table looking down at paper, one hand flat upon it, perfectly still, and at her side talking low and fast, the white-bearded man in scholar's black, and on the Queen's face. This is the thing. This is what stopped you mid-step so that Antonia had to push you on with 2 fingers. On the Queen's face. That face like a locked room, an expression you had never seen there and only ever saw once again. Not fear. You'd have understood fear. It was the face of someone doing sums and not liking the total and doing them again. The door closed. You delivered the satchel. You walked home over the booming bridge under a sky just starting to grey at the eastern rim, because in high June in Paris the nights are hardly nights at all, and the tournament was 11 days away. The lists are built in the Rue Saint-Antoine, in the east of the city before the Hôtel des Tournelles, the sprawling old royal residence of towers and gardens where the court has installed itself for the festival season, because the Louvre is a building site and the Tournelle has room. The Rue Saint-Antoine is the widest street in Paris, and for the tournament they have made it wider still, pulling down market stalls, sanding the roadway, cartload after cartload of river sand, raked and rolled until the surface is as even as a table, and building along both sides the stands, tiered wooden galleries hung with tapestry and cloth of gold, with a royal box for the Queen and the great ladies raised above the rest. Carpenters have been hammering for weeks. Half the shop's June orders are for women who will sit in those stands and want to smell like it. You get your leave the way you got the wedding. The master shuts the shop. This time he does not come. His knees, he says. The crowd, he says. But you have lived with him 2 years now, and you know his moods like weather, and what he actually says on the morning of the 30th of June as you leave is strange enough that you stop in the doorway. He says, "Stand where you can leave. Not upwind, stand where you can leave." And when you look back at him, he is already turned away to the shelves, gloved hands moving among the flasks, and you go out into the most beautiful morning of that whole summer, with those 4 words following you like a dog. The 30th of June, 1559, a Friday. You should know, before we walk down the Rue Saint-Antoine together, that this is the 3rd day of the jousting, and that the first 2 have been everything a festival should be. The king running course after course in the list like a man of 20, magnificent, tireless, breaking lances cleanly, wearing black and white, which everyone in that crowd understands and no one says aloud. Black and white are the colours of Diane de Poitiers, the king's lady, who is 59 years old and sits in the stands watching him wear her colours in front of his wife. The crowd doesn't care. Paris has spent 12 years not caring. The Queen wears her locked-room face and watches from the royal box, and the trumpets sound and the sand flies, and it is, everyone agrees, the finest tournament in living memory. You wedge yourself into a place on the north side, 2/3 down the list's standing room, packed against a rope with a leather worker's family on your left and 2 law clerks on your right, and you can leave. There's a gap behind you to an alley mouth. You checked, feeling foolish, hearing his voice. The heat builds. It is the last day of June, and by early afternoon the sand throws the light back up at you, and the whole street cooks. Sweat, sand, horse, the crowd smell of onions and wine and hot wool, and riding over it, wave after wave, as the ladies fan themselves in the stands, perfume, some of it yours. You know your own gloves at 20 feet. It is like being at a play where you sewed the costumes. The courses run all afternoon. Trumpets, the herald's cry, then the drumming of the 2 horses building through the ground into your feet. You feel each course before you properly see it, a doubled thunder through packed sand and packed bodies. Then the crack of lances on shields or armour, a sound like a green branch breaking but heavier, meatier, and the crowd's roar, and boys darting out to clear the splinters. Again, again. The king runs against the Duke of Savoy, against the Duke of Guise. He breaks well. The crowd is hoarse and happy and sunburnt. The light goes long and gold. It is nearly over. It should be over. The king has run his courses. Honour is full. The day is won. And this is the part every account agrees on, and every soul in that crowd retold for the rest of their lives. The king will not stop. One more course, he says. The word travels the stands and the standing crowd, the way the wedding vows travelled the parvis, mouth to mouth. One more course, against the captain of his own Scottish guard, a big fair young man, Gabriel de Montgomery, the young lion of his company, because their earlier meeting was inconclusive, and the King of France does not end a tournament on an inconclusive course. You are 15. You know nothing about anything. But you know the feel of a crowd after 2 years of moving through them with a satchel, and you feel the day change. It is subtle as a draught. The cheerfulness goes thin. It is late. The light is red. The horses are tired. Men around you are saying, in the mild way people say it when they expect to be ignored, enough now, it's enough. In the royal box, you're too far to see faces, you see only the geometry of it. There is a stir, a leaning together, a message passed down. The Queen begs the king not to run again. Everyone near the box hears it, and the whole street knows it within a minute, the way crowds know things. And the answer comes back down the lists, and the answer is that the king will run precisely one more course, and it is in honour of the Queen that he runs it. A courtesy, a gallantry, a king being charming to his wife in front of 100,000 people while doing the exact opposite of what she asked. The trumpets sound. You feel the thunder build through your feet, doubled close in, and the crack, when it comes, is wrong. You hear it wrong before you see anything. A lance break has a clean sound, a report. This one tears, a crack and then a splintering slide, wood shearing along wood, and the roar that should follow doesn't come. 100,000 people inhale at once that soft, enormous hour of the wedding day. The city's involuntary breath, and this time it does not come back out. What happened? You piece it together in the following seconds and days and decades, from what you glimpsed between heads at 150 feet, from Andrew who stood 20 feet from the barrier, from a lifetime of hearing it retold, is this. The lances met. Montgomery's broke, and the broken shaft, the jagged forward half of it still couched and driving with the full speed of both horses, rode up over the king's shield and struck him at the helmet and the visor. Whether it was not locked or the blow itself tore it up, God alone knows, and men argued it for 50 years. The visor gave, and the splintered wood went into the king's face. Above the right eye, splinters into the eye and the temple, some of them, they said afterward, as long as your finger. He did not fall. That is the detail that stayed in your body that comes back at night even now. The King of France did not fall. The horse ran on, and the crowd's held breath ran with it, and the king swayed in the saddle, clinging to the horse's neck, and men were already vaulting the barrier, and they caught the bridle and caught him, and for one moment before the bodies closed around him you saw, everyone on your side of the street saw, the gilded helmet come off, and the face beneath it was red, just red. At that distance, in that light, a red mask where a face should be, and the crowd made a sound you have no word for, not a scream, lower, a moan, out of 40,000 chests at once, this sound of the single animal discovering it is wounded, and then, you will tell this part badly because it was not experienced in order, nothing after the crack was in order, then the great machine of the day tore itself apart. The stands, which held the quality, erupted. Women's voices came off them in a spray, high and ragged. Below, the standing crowd surged, some toward the barrier, some away, and the two currents met in the middle and people went down, and the rope you'd stood against for 6 hours snapped somewhere along its length, and the whole mass of you lurched sideways like cargo in a listing ship. A shoulder drove into your back. The leather worker's wife was screaming a name. You could not see the lists at all any more, only backs and heads and one riderless horse's head above everything, eyes white, and the sound now was everyone at once. And you did the thing he told you. You stood where you could leave, so you left. You went backward through the crush. Lo, the way you go through a market crowd with a full satchel, hip and shoulder, giving way, never pushing straight. Into the alley mouth, through it, into a yard where hens were shrieking, over a fence, and you stood in a stranger's kitchen garden in the last red light with your heart going like the drums. And over the rooftops the sound of the Rue Saint-Antoine rose into the evening like the sound of the sea in a storm, and the bells of Saint-Paul began to ring, not for the hour. They carried him into the Hôtel des Tournelles. You know now what you could not know then, standing among the cabbages, that he walked part of the way, was helped up the steps on his own legs, the surgeon's accounts say, conscious, even speaking, and that the whole apparatus of the daylight kingdom collapsed inward around that walking wounded man within the hour. The gates of the Tournelles shut. Couriers exploded outward across Europe. And into that house, before midnight, came everyone this story has been carrying toward this day. The Queen, the terrified Dauphin, the Duke of Guise, the surgeons of the court, and then, summoned at the gallop, the greatest surgeon alive, Ambroise Paré. And, riding day and night from Brussels, where he serves the King of Spain, the great anatomist Vesalius himself. The best knowledge in the world converged on one bed in one room in the east of Paris. And so, in its smaller way, did you, because the midnight world does not stop for a catastrophe. The midnight world is what a catastrophe is made of. The summons came to the shop on the second day, not for perfume, or not only. Madonna Antonia's order, brought by a groom whose horse was blown, was for pastille, a triple quantity, and the strong spirits of wine, rectified, the purest in the house, 4 flasks. And Maître René read the paper twice and went down to the cellar without a word, and you understood at some point during that silent hour of packing, watching his beautiful, careful hands wrap glass in straw, that the spirits were for the wound, for washing it, that the shop's alcohol, which you had carried through the streets 100 times so that ladies could smell of orange flowers, was going to the head of the King of France, because the surgeons wanted the cleanest spirit in Paris, and the cleanest spirit in Paris was your master's, and the fastest legs the master had were yours. So it is you, again satchel on your hip, who crosses the city eastward on the first night of July, 1559, and Paris that night is a city holding its breath. Nobody sleeps. The churches are lit and droning. The crowds outside the Tournelles fill the Rue Saint-Antoine, where the stands still tower, half dismantled, skeletal against the sky, tapestries gone, sand still dark stained down at the far end where nobody walks, and the whole width of the street before the gates is a field of kneeling and standing and murmuring people, thousands, faces lit from below by tapers, praying for the king's eye, the king's head, the king's life. You show your paper 6 times in the last 200 yards. Guise's men hold the gates. Inside, the courtyard of the Tournelle is packed with saddled horses and unmoving grooms, the stillest crowded place you've ever stood, and torch shadows swing across the walls, and somewhere above, behind a rank of lit windows on the first floor, is the room. You do not, of course, go near the room. Antonia meets you in a passage that smells. This reaches you before she does, and your trade-trained nose reads it against every rule of tact. Of pastille smoke laid on thick, and under the smoke, blood and burned lamp oil and men's sweat gone stale with fear, and under all of it, faint the smell every tan-yard child knows and no perfume has ever beaten, the smell that meat makes when it turns. 2 days in July heat, you keep your face still, you hand over the flasks, the cones, the sealed jars. Antonia's hands take them. Her face by torchlight has aged 10 years in 3 days, and behind her, down the passage, a door opens for a servant with a basin, and out of that opening, for the length of 2 heartbeats, comes sound, a voice, low, wandering, wordless, or with words dissolved in it, the voice of a strong man far down inside pain, rising and falling like something adrift. Then the door swings shut, and it is cut off as cleanly as a lamp blown out. Antonia looks at you, and there is one instant, one, when the accountant's face fails, and underneath it is a woman from Florence who came north 30 years ago with a 14-year-old bride standing in a burning house. "Pray for him," she says. "Whatever you are, pray for him. And go home the river way, not the market way. The crowds are turning strange. You go home the river way." Behind you the 10 days begin. The days all France remembers. The bulletins, the hopes, the surgeons probing the wound while 4 condemned men's severed heads, fetched fresh from the executioner, were driven through with splintered lances in a ghastly hurry of experiment, so that Paret and Vesalius might learn the path of the wood through a human skull and save the living one. It did not save him. The splinters had gone too deep. The fevers came. The abscess bloomed behind the eye. He rallied, dictated, even had music played, married his sister to Savoy in a hushed midnight ceremony, steps from his sick room so the peace would hold. And on the 10th of July, 1559, in the early afternoon, Henri II, King of France, 40 years old, died in the Hôtel des Tournelles of a wound taken in play, in a gilded helmet from a young lion of his own guard, exactly as a verse printed 4 years earlier said a king would. And whatever you believe about prophecy, and the master taught you to believe nothing, you know what all Paris did with that verse in the summer of 1559, because you heard them do it. In every tavern and every church porch, they said it aloud, and crossed themselves, and looked west toward the Louvre, where the Italian woman kept her star readers, and lowered their voices. You were on the bridge when the passing bell began. Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois first, they said afterward, then church by church across the city. The slow iron count taken up roof to roof, until the air over Paris was one continuous shuddering bronze weight, and every soul on the Pont au Change stopped. Carters, goldsmiths, beggars, a woman with a basket of cherries, everyone standing quite still among the ringing. the way people stand in heavy rain they've decided not to run from. Maître René came up from the cellar and stood in the shop doorway, wiping his hands, listening, his face grey as the orris dust, and said at last, quietly in Italian, to the bells, to the river, to nobody, "Now it is night." And you thought he meant grief. You were 15. You did not yet understand that he was simply, professionally, accurately telling you the time. This splinter comes to you 3 weeks later, and you should know about the splinter, because you will carry it longer than you carry anything else in this story, including the grief. The lists in the Rue Saint-Antoine stand half dismantled all through July. Nobody wants the work. Carpenters find reasons. The stands come down plank by reluctant plank, but the roadway itself, the sanded run where it happened, lies untouched for weeks, roped off at first by order, and then by something stronger than order. People simply do not walk there. They walk around. Paris, which walks over its own dead 10 deep in every churchyard, makes a detour around a stretch of sand. You go at dusk on a delivery that could have gone another way because you're 15 and something in you needs to stand there. The rope is down by then. The sand is rain-flattened, hoof-marked at the edges where carters have finally begun to cut the corner. And in the sand, when you crouch, you didn't plan to crouch, your body did it. Your eye finds what 100 eyes must have passed over, a splinter of lancewood, long as your smallest finger, weathered grey on one side and still raw pale on the other, one end sheared to a needle. It is nothing. It is from any of 200 lances broken over 3 days by 4 dozen riders. The chance that it is from the lance is a chance no honest man would sell you. You pick it up anyway. It weighs nothing. It weighs less than a coin, less than a wafer, and it lies in your palm with the terrible lightness of the whole thing, that the strongest kingdom in Christendom, the drums, the white gown, the wine fountains, all of it, was pivoted on 18 inches of ash wood and a visor's latch. You wrap it in a scrap of glove leather from the shop, and you sew the leather shut that night with waxed thread, a little flat packet smaller than a thumb, and you put it on a cord around your neck under your shirt, where the knot soap once rode. You cannot say why. At 15 you tell yourself it is a relic of the king, God rest him. At 40 you will tell yourself it is a memento mori, like the skulls goldsmiths carve. At 70, sitting in a grass courtyard with your granddaughter, you will finally say the true thing. It is the crack in the seal. It is the proof you carry against your own skin that the daylight world, any daylight world, however loud its trumpets, is warm wax in cold air. You are wearing it still, but we're far ahead of ourselves. What happens after a king of France dies of a splinter? Here is what you saw, from below, from the between places, in the weeks the histories cover in a paragraph. First, the house dies with him. The Hôtel des Tournelles, that whole sprawling pleasure palace of towers and gardens in the east. The Queen will not stay in it, will barely let it be spoken of. The court is stripped out of it within days, a whole royal residence gutted of people like a fish, and the shutters go up, and it stands there afterward, vast and dark at the end of the Rue Saint-Antoine, and Paris walks around it too. Years from now, you will live to hear this, and something in your chest will move strangely when you do. She will have it pulled down, stone from stone. The place where her husband died will be erased from the earth by her order, and horses will be sold on the levelled ground. That is not a woman forgetting. That is a woman making sure. Second, the colour. She goes into black and never comes out. You must understand what a violation this is, because the centuries have forgotten it. Queens of France mourn in white. Deuil blanc, the white mourning, worn since time out of mind. Mary Stuart will wear white for her own losses and be painted in it. Catherine refuses. She takes black, Italian black, merchant black, the black of Florence. And she takes for her emblem a broken lance with the motto Lacrimae hinc, hinc dola. From this came my tears, from this my sorrow. And she wears that black every day for the remaining 30 years of her life, so that the woman you glimpsed in candlelight doing sums becomes, for a whole generation of French children, the shape at the centre of the kingdom, the Black Queen. The daylight court eventually returns to its silks. She never does. It is the midnight world, worn on the body in the noon sun. Third, and this you saw closest of all, because the shop dressed it, the fall of the favourite. Diane de Poitiers, the king's lady, whose black and white he wore into the lists, who for 12 years held the true power of the bedchamber, while the queen held the title. Within days of the king's death comes the settling of that account. No mob, no dungeon, nothing so crude. The queen requires of her the return of the crown jewels, inventoried, item by item, like a merchant recalling stock. And the chateau of Chenonceau, the jewel on its river arches that the king gave his lady, the queen takes back, trading her a lesser house for it. All perfectly legal, all perfectly polite, all utterly without mercy. Maître René hears the inventory story from the Florentine bankers and tells it to you over the grinding slab with something in his voice you have never heard there before. A kind of grim national pride. 25 years, Piccolo. 25 years that woman sat at her own table below the salt while another woman wore her jewels. And she waited, and she smiled, and she wrote her letters. Florentines not good at forgiving were very, very good at waiting. Remember that you work for a Florentine. And fourth, the boy. Because France now has a king who is 15 years old, your age to the season. Francois II, the pale, coughing bridegroom of the silver ships, with his beautiful Scots queen, and a realm that arithmetic says is bankrupt and religion says is splitting along a seam. And a 15-year-old king means that grown men will govern in his name, and the men who move fastest are the men already holding his household, the Guises, the beautiful Mary's uncles, the Duke who played the wedding crowd like an instrument, and his brother the Cardinal, of whom below stairs says only bad things quietly. Within a day of the old king's death, the Guises have the young king, the Seals, the council, the Queen Mother. That is her title now. Overnight, Queen Mother at 40 does not fight them. Watch her instead do the Florentine thing. She moves her apartments next to the king her son's. She's present at every council, saying little. She signs after them, writes to the ambassadors, learns the files. The kitchen, which is always wrong except when it isn't, puts it this way in Perette's voice, over soup. The Guises got the crown. The Italian got the corridors. And you know something about corridors. Her night orders resume before the state mourning is a fortnight old, and they resume changed. More candles worth of everything. The cabinet at the Louvre burns later than ever. You deliver at 1 and the lights are full, at 2 and they are full. Mathurin swears the between hour when they go dark has moved to 4. The letters multiply. This you know from the wax, because the shop supplies her sealing wax now too. Fine vermilion sticks by the boxful, and the boxes go through at a rate that means dozens of letters a night. To Spain, to Rome, to her daughter, the new Queen of Spain, to every corner of a Europe that believes a merchant's daughter in black cannot possibly hold what she is holding. And the small stair visitors come more often, the white spade beard, the younger Italians. Once, a woman, deep-hooded, whom Andrew watches go up with a face like a man watching weather he doesn't like. You see the Queen Mother herself only twice in the whole reign of Francois II, and the second time is the one that matters, so let it stand for the age. It is December 1560, 17 months after the splinter, and the kingdom is holding its breath again, because the boy king is dying. It happened with the speed that frightens people most. An abscess in the ear, the physicians say, from the cold air of a November hunt at Orléans, where the court has gone for a great assembly of the realm. The pain drove into his head, the fever followed. The word reaches Paris in official soothings and unofficial terror. Behind it comes the arithmetic every kitchen in France is doing on its fingers. If this king dies, the next is his brother Charles, and Charles is 10. 10. A child in a realm already grinding at the seam between the old faith and the new. With the Guises on one side of the seam and half the princes of the blood on the other, and money nowhere. Men are being hanged and burned for religion this winter. A plot to seize the young king bloodied the spring at Amboise. The corpses hung from the chateau balconies. Everyone can feel the thing coming that nobody will name. You can feel it in the shop, where gentlemen of both parties now buy their gloves at different hours. The court is at Orléans, but the Queen Mother's Paris orders never stop. The Louvre's cabinet stays provisioned like a lamp kept trimmed in an empty house. And so it is that on a black iron night in the first week of December, you're at the palace with the satchel when the courier comes. You hear him before you see him. Hooves on frozen ground carry half a league, and a horse pushed to death sounds like nothing else. A wet, ragged double beat with no spring left in it. The postern torches gutter. Mathurin is up off his stool. The rider comes out of the dark along the river wall already shouting the password, and past you at arm's length as the gate swings. Mud to the eyebrows, ice in his beard, one glove gone. And what you remember is his face, because his face has the news on it plainly, the way faces below a certain exhaustion cannot lie. And behind you, an hour later, as the palace wakes window by window in the dead of night, lights climbing the dark face of the building like sparks up a chimney, you stand in the yard with Perrette, who has run out with a shawl over her head, and the two of you watch the midnight world take delivery of a kingdom. Francois II died at Orléans on the 5th of December, 1560, aged 16, after 17 months as King of France. And this time there is no rival ready, no Guise coup in the corridors, because the corridors have an owner now. Within days, France learns the shape of its future. The new king is the child Charles IX, and the government of the realm during his childhood belongs, by council's consent, by documents prepared with the speed that tells you everything about who had been drafting through the death watch, to his mother, gouvernante de France, the Italian woman, the merchant's daughter, the widow in black with the star readers and the broken lance emblem, whom Paris crossed itself against 18 months ago, is now, in every way that matters, and for most of the next 30 years, the ruler of France. Maître René closes the shop for the young king's memorial day, and the two of you stand in the freezing street among the tolling. Your third royal knell in 3 years. You are becoming a connoisseur of the worst sound in the world, and he says nothing at all this time. But that night in the cellar over the little furnace he pours 2 thimbles of something from the locked cabinet that is definitely not for wearing and hands one to you, the first and last time he ever does, and raises his own and says, to the daughter of Lorenzo de' Medici's line. He looks at the flame through the liquid. 26 years, Piccolo. 26 years since 14 of us rode north with a little girl the French court called the shopkeeper's daughter to her face. They're all dead or old now, and she buried the husband who shamed her, and the son who was too weak to need her, and tomorrow the ambassadors of every crown in Christendom will wait in her antechamber. He drinks. His eyes are wet, and his voice is steady, and what is in his voice is not triumph and not grief, but both of them fused, like the 2 smells in civet. Nobody wanted this for her. She did not want this for her. She wanted the man in the gilded helmet to grow old. Remember that too when they tell you stories about the Black Queen. She would trade all the corridors in France to be nothing again. You drink. It goes down like a lit wick. And above your heads the boards boom as a late cart crosses the bridge, and the river breathes, and somewhere east across the dark city the Tournelle stands empty with its shutters up waiting to be unmade. Now the years begin to move the way years do when you're no longer counting towards something, steadily, seasonally in the round. You are 16, then 18, then 20. Your voice settles. Your shoulders find the width the pestle built into them. The cracks in your winter knuckles become geography, permanent, mapped. Guillaume the journeyman drinks himself out of the trade, and it is you at the alembic now on the days that matter. You weighing the musk grains on the little brass balance whose pans tremble at a breath. You whom Maître René sends alone to the drug merchants on the Rue de la Vieille Monnaie to smell the new season's ambergris and say yes or no with the shop's money on your tongue. The first time a supplier calls you Maître by mistake, you correct him. The second time, Maître René, standing behind you, does not. And the midnight world you serve settles too, settles in and spreads, the way night spreads in autumn, a little earlier each day. The Queen Mother rules, and rules from her rooms, and rules most of all in the hours you deliver to. This is the part historians write with numbers, so take the numbers, because you saw the raw material of every one of them. She writes, in the years you serve her house, thousands of letters. On some nights her secretaries seal until the birds start, and the shop's vermilion wax goes to the Louvre by the boxful, and you have held in your 2 hands, in one satchel, on one frozen night, the sealing wax for correspondence to Madrid, Vienna, Rome, Edinburgh, and Constantinople. She sleeps her 4 hours and rises in the dark and works. The ambassadors complain of it in their dispatches. Audiences at ours no Christian court keeps. The Spanish envoy writes home, in cipher you will never read but whose gist all Paris could have supplied, that the Queen Mother sees everything and everyone in that palace, and that nothing enters or leaves it unknown to her. You could have told him that for free. You are one of the things that enters and leaves, because she talks to you now. Not often. 6 times, perhaps 8 in as many years. You could count them on your fingers, and you have lying awake an old man arranging his relics. It begins with the bergamot, which she has made her own, the Calabrian order triples, and once, when you deliver it in person to the cabinet door, she takes the flask from Antonia's hands, unstoppers it there in the doorway, holds it below her nose with her eyes half closed for the length of 3 heartbeats, and says, to no one, in Italian, 1 word, Firenze. which is not where bergamot comes from, and is exactly where it comes from, and you understand. Because you are a grass boy who has smelled leather in a Paris cellar and been 11 years old again, instantly, standing in your father's yard. Smell is the midnight sense. That is what those years teach you above everything. Sight belongs to the day, to the trumpets, to the cloth of gold. But at 2 a.m, in a palace of guttering candles, the world comes to you nose first, and the woman who rules France rules it half by nose. The bad air she weighs against with your pastilles, the poison she is forever accused of and forever fearing, the one flask of Italian orange and bergamot that is the only door out of the corridors, and back to a garden in Florence where she was a girl with both parents 3 weeks dead. You supply the door. That is what a perfumer is, Maître René says in his cups on Christmas. Not a merchant of vanity, a doorkeeper. People pay us to leave the room they are locked in. Twice she asks after your father. Once, the time you polish brightest. She stops Antonia's hand on a night when the order is heavy, looks at you dripping on the tiles, February on your shoulders, and says, "The bridge in this weather," and someone your age. And then, dryly, the closest the locked room ever comes to a joke, "When my son is grown, we will pave the sky." Tell René the grey gloves were correct, and once, she asks you a question that is not small, and because you are perhaps 20, and it is perhaps 4 a.m, and the entire palace between you is asleep, you answer it. It is the year the Troubles have finally become the thing nobody would name. There is war inside France now, French against French, the new faith against the old. The first of the wars begun in the spring of 1562, after armed men fell upon a Huguenot congregation at Vassy, and the country came apart like wet paper. Paris that year is ugly in a way you have never seen it. Preachers screaming from the parishes, printers hanged, chains up at noon, your customers buying gloves at separate hours grown to customers who will not walk the same street. The Queen Mother has spent the year doing what she will spend 3 decades doing, riding between the armies, literally, her black coach on winter roads, bargaining, bribing, marrying, threatening, stitching truces that tear and stitching them again. And on this night taking delivery of the wax for another 100 letters with her own hands, because Antonia is ill, she looks at you and says, abruptly, in her rolled French, "Your street, the bridge. What do they say on it? Will Frenchmen kill Frenchmen in Paris? And you should say what a servant says. They say nothing, Majesty. They pray for peace and the king." And instead, because it is 4 a.m, and because she asked the bridge, and you are the bridge, you say the true thing, the thing the goldsmiths and the bird sellers and the leather workers' family actually say behind their shutters. Majesty, they already have. They are only waiting to be told it doesn't count as killing. Silence. Wax hisses. And the Queen Mother of France looks at you for 3 full seconds, the same 3 seconds as the horses at Lyon, 6 years and 3 reigns ago. And this time she does not laugh. She nods, once, slowly, an accountant confirming a figure she had reached herself and hoped was wrong. Then she says, "Tell your master the wax is short weight," which it is not, and which means go, and you go, and you do not sleep that day, and 10 years later, in a hot August, you will remember that exchange down to the smell of the room, and wish to God you didn't. But this story stops before that August, because I promised you sleep, and some doors even a doorkeeper should not open at bedtime. Ask me another night about the bell of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois, the bell that told you the hour 1,000 times on your way to the postern, and what was made to do in the dark of the 24th of August, 1572. Not tonight. Tonight we stay in the years when the midnight world still smelled of orange flowers, and I will give you, instead of that bell, the 2 nights that you kept, the 2 you would buy back whole from time if time sold. The first is the roof. It is a June night in the middle of the 1560s, warm, the moat quiet, and you have made your delivery early for once, and Perrette meets you at the postern with her particular look, the knife-flash look, and says, "The masons left the ladders lashed on the new wing. Andrew's on the west door. Andrew doesn't see boys." And so you climb up through the scaffolding of Lescot's wing in the dark, hands on rope and raw pine, sawdust smell and cold stone smell and the fresh-cut oak of the platforms, 30 feet, 50, past the sleeping goddesses in their carved garlands, Goujon's stone women serene at arm's length with the whole night behind them. And you come out on the leads of the finest building in France, and Paris is lying below you like something poured. You have never in your life been higher than a house. Now the whole city is one dark tide flat scattered with embers, watchfires at the gates, a lit window here and there like a dropped coin, the black doubled ribbon of the river with its islands riding at anchor, and the bridges, your bridge, stitched across it. One seam of faint hearth glow where the shop is, where the cat is asleep on your blanket. Notre Dame's towers stand against the summer sky the colour of iron. Beyond the walls, fields, then darkness all the way to the rim of the world. The city hums. Even at midnight it hums, a low grain of sound, mills and water and 10,000 sleeping breaths, and the air up there moves clean off the river and smells for once of nothing at all. No moat, no midden, no civet, no smoke. Empty air. You had forgotten air could be empty. Perrette sits with her back against a chimney, arms around her knees, kitchen pale face turned up. Behind and below you, one rank of windows in the old wing still glows honey gold. The cabinet, the candles, her. The 2 of you sit above the ruler of France and the sleeping capital of the kingdom, 2 servants on borrowed lead, saying nothing much, for the best hour of your young life. At the end of it, Perrette says quietly, the thing you will say to your own grandchildren on a grass rooftop half a century later. Everyone down there thinks the palace is the top of the world. Look, the palace has a roof like a house. Everything has a roof, Grass, even her. And you climb down and Andrew doesn't see boys, and within the year Perrette marries a saddler from the Rue Saint-Honoré and leaves service, round-bellied and laughing, and kisses your cheek at the postern in front of Mathurin and everyone, and life takes her the ordinary ways, and she survives everything that is coming, you find out much later, and dies old, and that is one whole person this story's allowed to hand you safe. Hold her. Stories like this one don't get many. The second night you kept is smaller, and it is the last one, so we will let it stand at the end of the watch. It is the winter of 1566 into 67, and you are 22, and it is your final year. Your father's letters have run from news to summons. The yard in Grasse needs its son, and Maître René, who is old now truly, not shop old, has begun saying when you go instead of if, and has written you the testimonial that will make you in the south a made man, trained on the Pont au Change, supplier by his master's hand to the Queen Mother's own household. On one of the last deliveries of your life, a night of hard frost, the whole Louvre ringing cold and silent as a bell between strikes, Antonia, grey entirely now, bent, but still counting everything 3 times, takes the satchel, checks it, seals the receipt, and then holds out to you, flat on her palm, something extra. A pair of gloves. Not new. Cut small, kidskin gone soft as cloth with wear at the seams, the scent nearly gone. Nearly. Your nose finds the ghost of an old formula under the leather, orange flower and orris, and a musk ground finer than anyone grinds it now, your master's hand from before your time. Hers, Antonia says, 20 years past. She has ordered the chests cleared. What is worn goes out of the house. She said, and here Antonia's voice does the thing it did once before, in a torchlit passage that smelled of blood and aloes wood. She said, give the old pears where they will be understood, where they will be understood. Not to you by name. She has 400 servants and a kingdom on fire, and she will not have remembered your name from 1 year's end to the next. But somebody in that candlelit room, clearing the past out of chests at 2 a.m, said those words, and Antonia carried them down the cold stairs to the postern with a pair of worn gloves and chose you. You take them in both hands. The leather holds the chill of the stone. You carry them home inside your shirt next to the splinter, and the frost fires the whole sky over the river green and white, and that is the end of your service in the midnight world. A boy from Grasse walking a frozen bridge with a queen's old gloves against his heart, understanding. One more night from those last years, because it is the night your hands remember best and hands keep the truest archive. It is a February, black and dry. The worst kind for the trade. Frost outside, and inside the cellar the little charcoal furnace burning since noon, because the Queen Mother's Lent order is late, and the still must run through the night. Maître René's chest is bad that winter. Past midnight you send him up to bed, and for the first time in your apprentice life you keep the alembic alone. Understand what that means in your body. Spirits of wine coming over hot from the swan neck, drop by drop into the glass, each drop a bead of the most flammable substance in Paris, in a wooden room, under a wooden shop, on a wooden bridge, over black water. Your whole self narrows to a hand's breadth of copper and flame. You feed the charcoal one broken piece at a time with the little tongs, and the tongs are hot enough now to feel through the rag a bright line across your palm. You watch the head of the still the way Andrew watches doors. Your eyes sting with the fumes. You breathe shallow, off to the side, the way he taught you. The river knocks a plate of ice against the pier below your feet, a slow, dull toll through the stone, and every joint in your back has its own separate complaint from 6 hours on a stool built for a shorter man. And near 3, it happens. A drip creeps down the outside of the glass where the luting has dried and cracked. A thread of raw spirit running toward the furnace lip, quick and shining, and your body moves before your mind is consulted. The wet cloth, kept soaking in the bucket for exactly this and never once needed in 4 years, is out of the bucket and clapped over the run before you know you have stood, and the hiss it makes on the hot copper goes through your teeth, and then there is only your own heartbeat, enormous, and the drip of the still resuming its patient count, and the ice knocking below, and the shop above you full of sleeping master and sleeping cat, and 40 years of his life in glass and wax, none of it burned. You sit back down. Your hands are shaking so the tongs chatter. So you set the tongs down and press your palms flat on the cold stone floor until the stone drinks the shaking out of them, a trick of Perrette's, learned from a kitchen full of knives. Then you relute the joint with fresh clay and feed the fire, and run the still till grey light comes down the stair, and when Maître René descends at dawn and reads the night in the level of the receiving flask and the fresh clay on the joint in your face, he looks at you for a long moment and says only, "Now you are a perfumer. Everything before this was smelling." He is right, and you know it even then. The trade is not the beautiful part. The trade is the wet cloth in the bucket. Every craft in that dark city had one. The thing kept ready for the night nobody wants. The habit that stands guard while the skill sleeps. And the whole midnight world you understand at last, from the Queen Mother's 4 hours down to the watch creaking past the chains, is the same thing at the scale of a kingdom. A wet cloth kept soaking year after year against the drip that is always somewhere starting to run. So you go south in the spring of 1567 and the rest of your life happens. The good, ordinary daylight rest of it. 18 days on the roads, Paris thinning behind you into orchards and then vineyards and then the grey olive country, and on the last ridge above grass the wind comes up the valley full of everything you are made of. Crushed thyme, hot stone, tan bark, jasmine from the new plantings, and you stand in your stirrups and weep like a hired mourner and don't care who sees. Your father is smaller than you left him, and his grip is not. You take the yard, and then more than the yard. The testimonial does its work, and the Paris training does more. And within 10 years the House of Ferrand is scenting skins for glovers in Montpellier and Lyon. And within 20, Colin Ferrand of Grasse is what Maître René made him to be, a doorkeeper, a builder of the invisible, a man whose hands smell of orange flowers at his own daughter's wedding. You marry Honorate, the notary's daughter, who laughs like Paët and adds like Antonia. Children, vines, sun, the whole southern noon of a life. And the news from the north arrives the way news arrived in that century, months old, worn smooth by many mouths tolling. You're drying jasmine the August you hear what the bell of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois was made to do, and what Paris did by its light, and for 3 days you cannot work, thinking of the postern, the corridors, the customers who bought gloves at separate hours, thinking, above all, God forgive you, of a 4 a.m. conversation about what the bridge was saying, and of a nod, once, slowly. You will argue with her ghost about that August for the rest of your life, in the small hours, the way old servants do. How much was her hand, how much her terror, how much the animal the Duke of Guise once conducted with 2 arms spread wide, slipped loose at last with no conductor living who could hold it. You were not there. You know only what you knew, that she did her sums at night and hated totals she could not change, and that fear has the best nose in France. It smelled poison in clean water once at Tournon. In that August it smelled worse, everywhere, and was believed. Maître René dies in his bed. In his bed, Piccolo, mark it, says his last letter, dictated to a notary with the shop smell no doubt still in the paper, an Italian poisoner 50 years in Paris, dead of old age in his bed above the water. Let them put that in their pamphlets. The shop passes to strangers. Matherin's brazier goes cold some winter no one records. Andrew, you never learn. Walls are not written down. And she outlasts nearly all of it, the way she outlasted everything. 3 more sons on the throne, 10 more years of wars than anyone could bear, truces stitched and torn and stitched, the black coach on the winter roads deep into her 60s, gout swollen, half blind, still bargaining, still writing her dozens of letters a night in that hand the secretaries wept over. She builds, because Medici build, the Tuileries rising in the west where you once watched market gardens from the palace roof, and a new hotel in the city with a strange fluted column standing against its flank, a stone needle with a hidden stair inside it, climbing to a platform under the sky, built, all Paris says, for the star readers, for the white spade beard and his charts, so that the Queen Mother's astronomers can stand above the roofs at midnight and take the measure of heaven. When you hear of the column, you laugh out loud alone in the drying shed, startling the cat. Of course she built the midnight world its own tower. The column is still standing in Paris tonight, by the way. The observatory pillar of Catherine de Medici, 4.5 centuries on, wedged now against the round flank of a market hall, and the traffic goes past it, and almost no one looks up. You can go and put your hand on it. I have. The stone is cold in every season. That's already a thing in her lifetime, that column. Some things get to stay. She dies far from Paris, at Blois on the Loire, in January of 1589, 69 years old, 13 days after her son the king has the Duke of Guise's son cut down in the room above her sick bed, the last total of all, delivered to her while she lay too ill to rise, and those who were there say she turned her face to the wall and said that the kingdom was destroyed, and she was not often wrong. Paris, which she fed, freed, flattered, feared, and never once won, refuses her body a royal burial in its own convulsed year. She's put into the ground at Blois almost privately, the woman who staged the grandest funerals of the age, and decades pass before she's carried at last to Saint-Denis to lie beside the man in the gilded helmet, under the tomb she built for them both while she lived, where her own marble effigy, they say, was carved twice, because the first showed her as death truly takes people, and she looked on it and ordered another, sleeping and smooth, even there, even in stone, present everywhere, noticed on her own terms or not at all. You outlive her by decades. You become the old man in the grass courtyard, the one the grandchildren circle at dusk when the swifts are screaming, because the old man was in Paris. The old man served the Black Queen. Show us, grandfather, show us. And on the right evenings, when the light is low and gold and the jasmine is coming on with the dark the way it does, the way it always does, scent rising as the sun fails, night's first delivery. On the right evenings you send the little one inside for the box. It is a plain olive wood box and everything is in it. The testimonial, the ink gone brown, a vermilion seal stick worn to a stub, the letter R still readable in the dye mark at its end. A sliver of Bologna soap, 60 years past its scent, kept for a reason you have never told anyone and never will. She is a saddler's grandmother in the Rue Saint-Honoré and safe, and some things are yours. The gloves, the small kidskin pair, seams soft as cloth, and when your granddaughter lifts them to her face, frowning, hunting, you watch her nose do what yours did on a frozen postern step, find the ghost. Orange flower, orris, a musk ground finer than anyone grinds it now. There is a smell in these, she says, amazed. There is still a smell. And you say, that is the whole trade in one sentence, little one. The heart of the house stays after everyone has left the room. And last, from under the gloves, the little flat leather packet on its worn-out cord, sewn shut with waxed thread by a boy's hands in candlelight 70 years ago. You do not open it. You have never opened it. You let them hold its lightness on their palms. It weighs less than a wafer, less than a coin. And you tell them what it weighs anyway. A helmet, a verse, a kingdom, a whole world of trumpets that thought it was permanent. Warm wax, you tell them in cold air. Then you put it back around your neck where it has ridden since the reign of a king 3 kings gone, and the swifts come down the dust screaming, and Honorat calls that supper is ready, and the great and terrible people of your story sleep under their marble in the north, and you go in to eat soup with your family in the plain lamplight of a small warm room, which is, you have had 70 years to check the sum, the finest room the world contains. The children ask, always, at the end, "Were you afraid of her, grandfather? The Black Queen?" And you give them the true answer, the only coin of that whole treasury still good at full value. "Yes," you say, "everyone was afraid of her. She was afraid too." That is what nobody tells you about palaces, little ones. They are full to the roof leads with frightened people being brave in the dark, and the bravest one was awake the latest, and I carried her the smell of home. The evening settles now. Let it settle. The courtyard cools stone by stone, the way the Louvre corridors cooled, the day's heat rising out of the walls into the first stars. The jasmine is fully awake in the dark, doing its night work, filling the air the way candlelight fills a room. Somewhere down the valley a dog barks twice and thinks better of it. The swifts have gone up too high to hear. You're old enough now, you, listening wherever your one candle is burning, you're old enough now to know what the boy on the bridge knew, that the day, however loud, is not the whole of the world, that there is another kingdom that begins when the shutters close, and it is not empty, and it is not to be feared. Letters are being written in it. Bread is rising in it. Watchmen are keeping it. Somewhere in it a queen is awake so that others can sleep, and somewhere a boy is crossing a frozen bridge with something warm against his heart, and the river goes on breathing under the boards, all night, every night, 450 years of nights, and it has never once stopped. Your day is done. Whatever it held, the cracked seals, the long corridors, the sums that wouldn't come right, it is over now, and it cannot be improved by holding it. So set it down. Set it down the way the satchel came off the shoulder at the postern. All at once, the whole weight, gone. You are warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a roof and a bed, and tomorrow will send its orders soon enough, but tomorrow is not allowed in this room. This room is yours. Even her, even the palace, everything has a roof, and under yours right now there is nothing left to carry. Let the candles burn down now, one by one, the way they burned down in the cabinet toward 4. Let the letters lie unfinished. Let the corridors go dark behind you, door by door by door. Let the city hum its low grain of sleep. Let the river breathe. Centuries will pass. The fortress with its one lace-stone wing will grow into a palace a mile long, and then into a museum full of quiet, and the bridge with the city on its back will shed its houses and stand bare in the wind, and the midnight errands will be run by wires and light. But people will still lie down at the end of long days in that city and in yours, still set down what they carried, still turn their faces toward the smell of orange flowers, or bread, or rain, and follow it out of the locked room of the day and into the dark garden of sleep. Some things do not change. The tired body does not change. The door out of the day is always there, and it opens from your side. It is opening now, breath by breath, bell by distant bell. The watch is passing along the walls, and all is well, and the seal on this night is whole and unbroken. Sleep now, the way the city sleeps below the roof leads, deeply, humming, safe under the same old stars the spade-bearded men once measured from a stone column that is standing yet. You've earned this rest. Take it. Good night.